Everybody. My name is Derek Day. I'm with the Stormwater Strategic Initiative, and today we're going to be talking about some of the work that the Strategic Initiative leads have been doing since 2016. We're going to talk about some of the work that we've done, as well as some of the lessons that we've learned. Today, I am joined by my colleagues from the Habitat Strategic Initiative and the Shellfish Strategic Initiative. From Habitat, we have Jennifer Griffiths and Julianne Kohlinger. And from the Shellfish Strategic Initiative, we have Audrey Coyne and Claire Hard. That is not all of us. We've got others on the line here as well. We are teams that work together on quite a lot, and there are more than a couple of us. But anyway, I want to again thank everybody for joining us today, and we will go ahead and get ourselves kicked off. And just a quick housekeeping note, if folks have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. We're going to be taking questions at the end and answering what we can as we go from the chat. But just that quick housekeeping note, so feel free to drop those in the chat. Our agenda today, we're going to be talking about what the strategic initiative's role is in Puget Sound recovery. We're going to talk about accomplishments and lessons learned from our SIL 1.0. And we're going to talk about growing and adapting into SIL 2.0. We're also going to have time for questions and discussions afterwards. So this is a little bit about how the Puget Sound recovery system works. Some of you may already know this, but it's a big system. This is a big problem. There are a lot of people who work in the Puget Sound recovery arena. We are all working essentially in service of the National Estuary Program for Puget Sound. So that's the big umbrella that we're working under. We use the action agenda. That is our guidance. That is what we use to determine kind of where our funding goes and what priorities we're going to focus on. We work really closely with the Puget Sound Partnership and EPA and their new Puget Sound Recovery National Program Office. We also use Puget Sound Geographic Program funds to fund the work that we do. And we're split into three strategic initiatives. And those strategic initiatives are Habitat, Shellfish, and Stormwater. And each of those strategic initiatives is underpinned by state agency partners. So for Habitat, we have WDFW and DNR. For Shellfish, we have the Department of Health and some supporting partners. And at the Stormwater Strategic Initiative, we're led by Ecology in partnership with the Department of Commerce and the Washington Stormwater Center. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, each of these strategic initiative leads is a partnership. These are complex issues, and we bring expertise and capacity from different state agencies to bear on these problems. So each strategic initiative lead has its own kind of purview. We're broken up again by Habitat, Shellfish, and Stormwater. The Habitat team focuses on issues including things like floodplains and estuaries. They do land use work, shorelines, marine vegetation as well. The Shellfish Strategic Initiative, in some ways, is kind of lucky. They get to focus on shellfish, and that usually comprises bacterial contamination from human and animal sources and other non-point runoff. And then in the Stormwater Strategic Initiative, we work on a little broader than kind of your classic stormwater definition. We call it big tent stormwater, and it's really a water quality program. So we do water quality issues ranging from toxics in fish to freshwater quality. We do marine water quality, and we also focus on issues that are upstream of those specific endpoints or water bodies. So we also work on issues like non-point. We work on land use. We do kind of stormwater management, kind of classically defined, and we also work on wastewater. Next slide. So we work under a funding model that's defined by EPA with input from the management conference. The funding model, I really like to think of it as not necessarily just a funding model, because under the Strategic Initiative 1.0, we've really moved into a planning and coordinating model. But this is an evolution that goes from the lead organizations. Those started around 2011 and went through 2019. Those were kind of early ways that we moved money in Puget Sound recovery. There wasn't a ton of planning. It was more project focused. It looked much more like kind of a standard pass-through grant program. And it really was typified by targeted requests for proposals. There was a shift moving into what we're talking about today, which is really the strategic initiative leads and the work that happened under those and the way that we've done that work. Um, the strategic initiative leads had a couple of different innovations that really helped with things like inclusion and transparency uh, compared to lead organization models. So we started with the strategic planning, developing implementation strategies, or taking over some that the partnership had developed prior to the strategic initiative leads. We also convened advisory teams. This is a really important innovation for the strategic initiative leads. And then we funded near-term actions. So we really focused on the funding, moving through near-term actions that were defined in the action agenda. This has transitioned into the model that we're working under right now, which is the 2.0 model, as we call it. And these really look more like regional grant programs or regional programs that do planning, we do coordinating, we also do grants. So we are working to advance action agenda priorities by operationalizing the implementation strategies. Those strategies really operate at a strategic planning level, and operationalizing gets us down into kind of work planning scale. We are funding priorities through targeted RFPs. So we don't have this big all call for projects moving forward, but we're focusing on specific targeted priorities. We are also spending a lot of our time really convening, creating, and supporting collaborative partnerships and working on technical and policy initiatives because not every problem that we have in Puget Sound can be solved with dollars alone. We talk about political will all the time. We talk about policy needs, and we talk about the need for coordinated and larger funding. So these are really themes that we're able to carry through our work under this funding model. So under this funding model, we do work in a couple of different ways. Again, I mentioned that we don't just fund projects. We do work to convene partners and create forums for people to identify, solve problems, and really define some of the work that we need to do for Puget Sound recovery. We do make investments, and when we make investments, we try to make strategic investments that are catalytic and fill niches in the Puget Sound recovery funding system. We also, again, we do a lot of strategic planning. A lot of that looks like us trying to integrate planning across scales. So we need things from the federal government, we need things from the state partners, we need things from local partners, and we need to be able to scale all of those needs for Puget Sound recovery. Next slide, please. So a couple of big takeaways that we'd like to leave folks with today is one, that this funding model and planning model continues to evolve. And we are working to build programs and collaborative systems to be able to accelerate our recovery strategies. We also really try and fund niches to create a foundation for other programs, the bigger capital programs that address Puget Sound recovery needs or can, and then also to try and identify and work towards important policy needs that we have in Puget Sound recovery. We also really want to emphasize that this is a team sport, and we really want to work and strive to uplift partner efforts. This isn't just us. We are a big community. We have large networks of advisors, and we need all hands on deck for Puget Sound recovery. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleagues with the Shellfish Strategic Initiative.
Thanks, Derek. Good morning, everyone. I'm Audrey Coyne. I lead the Shellfish Strategic Initiative at the Department of Health, and I'm going to be building off of kind of what Derek set us up with and continue on with what the roles of the SILs are. So next, there we go. So one role has been to help build this implementation strategy program supporting Puget Sound recovery. Implementation strategies are meant to be roadmaps for achieving specific ecosystem targets for the Puget Sound vital sign indicators. They align and focus recovery efforts on the most important interim outcomes. And we can transition. So this has been a big component of the SIL's 1.0 program work. The SILs contributed to building an implementation strategy program through coordinating the development of new implementation strategies and adaptively managing them. Implementation strategies are built from extensive partner engagement and input at all phases of the process. We utilize what we call core teams, interdisciplinary teams, workshops, targeted solicitation to assemble experts. And the SILs play the role of bringing folks together and facilitating the process. And then with the foundation of partner engagement, this also creates a process that builds on consensus around strategic direction that is robust and transparent. So under 1.0, this work resulted in the addition of 4 new implementation strategies. We have freshwater quality, marine water quality, and toxics in fish coordinated through the stormwater SIL. And then we have shoreline armoring coordinated through the habitat SIL. And then we also had 4 implementation strategies that had already existed that went through an update process. So Habitat facilitated an update for estuaries, floodplains, and land development and cover. And then Shellfish facilitated the update for the shellfish beds implementation strategy. And then all this work is also done following the Puget Sound Partnership's implementation strategy guidance that was developed through the partnership that came out in 2016. And then in turn, these implementation strategies, they also support the action agenda development and update processes. So supporting the 2018 action agenda, and then again in the 2022 action agenda update. And now with the 2022 action agenda, we have a direct correlation between implementation strategies and the strategies in the action agenda under these focus areas. And then moving forward, the SILS work has supported the implementation strategy program has continued under 2.0. So one highlight is Habitat SIL is currently facilitating the development of the implementation strategy for marine vegetation. And then also moving beyond supporting the development of implementation strategies, there has been specific focus on adaptive management and the integration of cross-cutting topics, which include climate change, resiliency and adaptation, diversity, equity and inclusion, environmental justice, as well as tribal treaty rights. These were priorities that were recognized under 1.0 work, but under 2.0, there has been more emphasis and an intentional integration of these topics into implementation strategy, adaptive management, and ultimately SIL program work and our investments. For example, the 2.0 request for proposal process, we now have evaluation criteria that scores the integration of these priorities into the proposed work that we invest in. And then another big emphasis under 2.0 is now what we call operationalizing. So as implementation strategies are the foundation for the work of the SILs, our role is to operationalize them. And they guide us in our program work and where we put our program capacities to support those non-funding related barriers that Derek touched on, as well as guiding the investments and funding decisions through the SIL programs. So next slide, what does operationalizing look like? A main component to operationalizing continues to be bringing people together under a strategic framework. I think of it as during the planning phase, we are bringing people together to identify what needs to happen for progress. In the operationalizing phase, we're bringing people together to identify how do we do it. That's a collective we, how do we do it? And so there can be many pathways in how we do it. One is the funding pathway. We also have engagement work for making progress towards those non-funding priorities that have been identified. And then we also have those hard to tackle barriers where the SILs work to support collaborative problem solving to help to get to how do we overcome them. And then as I mentioned, next slide, I think um, highlighting we do have the funding pathway for operationalizing. This chart is from the 1.0 award of EPA's Puget Sound Geographic Funds across the three SILs. But the SILs have passed through at least 77% to support priority investments across Puget Sound. So that was all speaking generally, but sharing some more tangible highlights from operationalizing across the SILs, looking at both program capacity and investment components of the work. So across this chart, you'll see supporting piloting programs. Habitat was able to support 6 piloted programs and 6 programs that then transitioned to being permanent. Work to help fill research and data gaps, work to develop guidance and BMP resources. Stormwater has supported the development of over 70 guidance documents. We also have habitat and shellfish bed improvements. There has been a net improvement of over 3,000 shellfish acres since 2016, as well as supporting state and local policy efforts. And then we have convening workshops formed with expert stakeholders to develop solutions. Habitat just held a Habitat and Sea Level Rise forum last week with over 200 attendees participating. So again, snapshot of some highlights across the SILs. Next, we're going to hone in a little bit closer and share a few specific examples from each SIL of how the SILs weave together funding, partners, and capacity. So starting with a funding highlight from the Shellfish SIL on the SIL's ability to pilot, fund, and support partners obtaining permanent positions to implement priority work. One example of this is through an investment through the Department of Agriculture. They use project funds to pilot 2 new positions in their dairy nutrient management program. These new positions work to improve relationships with farming communities and increase voluntary participation in farm planning and technical assistance. They were then able to use this positive outcome of this work from having that added program capacity to demonstrate a need for more permanent positions in their program work, which they did receive permanent funding for those 2 positions under state legislative spending in 2021. So the added capacity for this program work was able to continue past the project grant and able to continue to better support farming communities through their program work. And then I'm going to turn it to stormwater for a capacity highlight.
Thank you, Audrey. So our team was able to develop an implementation strategy for toxics in fish. And when I say our team, I mean that we really just oversaw it. Each of these implementation strategies involves somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 100 different people touch them before we're done. So they really represent a broad expertise and a depth from the Puget Sound recovery. And this really makes us able to kind of reach really the pinnacle or holy grail of planning in really developing a plan that actually works. And not only works, sometimes people will just pick it up and do the things that are in it. And this was really something that we were able to accomplish with toxics in fish. It underpinned the Southern Resident Killer Whale Task Force recommendations, and that gave us a really exceptional platform to take Puget Sound recovery needs and give them the kind of elevation that really helps get work done. We were also able to use that same strategy to fund projects that led to stormwater NPDES MS4 permit updates. And also, one of the parts of the toxics and fish strategy outlined the Safer Products Washington Act. and a partner from our process actually picked up that piece of the strategy, took it to the legislature, and Ecology has additional authority and capacity due to the people that we were bringing together, able to bring together the work that we were able to outline in the implementation strategy. So we have something that both sits pretty on the shelf and does work. So this is really an exciting example of how the planning can really leverage our internal capacity and give us new foundations for the work that we're doing. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Derek. And it's my turn to share a habitat example. Hi, everyone. Jennifer Griffiths, Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead at WDFW. And so, as we said numerous times, this is collective work, and our role is to find ways to help knit together our funding and all of our collective work and to build coalitions to develop solutions. And one of the core strategies to address the legacy of shoreline armoring on our Puget Sound shores is really thinking through incentive strategies that deal with the large number of residential parcels on the shoreline, many of which are armored, and both promote that removal and also find ways for people to steward their property and prevent the installation of armor. And so what I'm showing you here is the development of our social marketing-based strategy to do that. And where the dollars and or the heads come in across this story arc is where the HSIL program and also the lead organization, our predecessor, played a role with funding and or convening people. And so really there was this early social marketing research that tried to understand the needs of shoreline property owners and develop a shoreline marketing social marketing approach. Then the lead organization was able to fund pilot programs with local partners who are willing to take on this approach and really pilot and figure out how to actually do the work on the ground and engage homeowners. HSIL also sustained some of those programs through early near-term action funding. And then really as those pilot programs were kind of reaching a sunsetting period, the realization that they needed ongoing funding and that a grant program wasn't the way to build this program in the long term, and that these programs led to projects that were unique in their funding needs and also needed a strategy. So we collaborated with the partnership, the Ecosystem Coordination Board, Kitsap County, to bring together the Ecosystem Coordination Board and local shore-friendly programs and partners to think through how do we think about these funding solutions. Ultimately, the outcome of those conversations was a local regional partnership under the Estuary and Salmon Restoration Program that was able to expand the local program's reach so that every county has one. And then further, HSIL's worked to fund the continued development of financial incentives because we know that these projects are unique and we need to continue to think about what more can we put in our toolkit. And so there's really so many people involved in this effort, and it's really the ability to have our funding play a role in the people capacity and or the help exporting our partners do the work phase that's really unique about this funding model. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back. Or am I keeping going? My apologies. I'm next. I will keep going. As we kind of showed you overarching highlights from our program, we'd like to dig in now to some of our highlights from partners in the recovery community who we funded through the grant program. And so as we shared, these are really focused on accelerating the implementation strategies and the action agenda. And through the SIL 1.0 funding model, we had 5 rounds of funding given to us by EPA that we are able to spend over 8 years. That one extra year there is from an extension due to COVID. And then we also then passed through and made 5 funding decisions that were made as recommendations from our Strategic Initiative Advisory Team. So really our SILs convened the suite of experts from across Puget Sound for each of our topic areas and took their recommendations and implemented them for funding. And depending on the year, we looked at either the 2016 or the 2018 action agenda near-term actions as direct funding opportunities. And as a result, 67 unique organizations were primary subrecipients to a SIL. An additional many more partners might have received funding from that direct primary subrecipient as a further pass-through. We allocated $59.5 million to subawards and to 231 projects. And SILs, our host agencies, provide match to EPA for all of our federal funding, so we don't require match from our subrecipients. And what we'd like to highlight now is that we're investing across partners at all recovery scales. So we've had a large number of investments in local projects at which that scale can vary, but these are target recovery goals in individual communities within a local or integrating organization boundary, accomplishing important benefits while testing pilots and models for broader application. We have some investments in sub-regional projects that are across multiple local integrating organized areas, multiple watersheds to collect data, provide technical assistance, and facilitate partnerships. And then also investments Puget Sound region-wide. This could be research, policy guidance, collaborative networks to advance recovery in the Salish Sea ecosystem. So I'll be giving you some highlights across all of those. And just to see how that investment played out, in dollar amounts across the SILs. So these are millions of dollars allocated. So that's the money we allocated and contracted to subaward agreements. The individual expenditures on those awards may have varied a little bit. But if we had returned funds, we reallocated those funds as much as we could, particularly early in the process. And so you can see that there is a real distribution across local, regional, and sub-regional projects from each of the three strategic initiatives and variation across the three strategic initiatives because the type of work we're funding that's most important to accelerating our strategies is also different. And now I think I'm going to hand it over to Derek.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we wanted to share a couple examples of work that we invested in from our partners across Puget Sound. So these are local examples where we funded work that was really happening kind of at that smaller scale. But even when we funded work happening at a smaller scale, we really understand this to be catalytic or to be filling a gap in the Puget Sound recovery work that isn't covered by other authorities or other dollars. So a couple examples here from the Habitat team. We have a climate action toolkit that was developed through the North Olympic Peninsula Research Conservation and Development Council. We also have Jefferson County that we invested in to develop a cost share program for low-income on-site septic owners. And then a stormwater example here, we funded Clallam County to work to adopt their first stormwater management plan and development codes and ordinances with an emphasis on low-impact development and green stormwater infrastructure. And next, we'll talk a little bit about what each of these projects was able to do. So again, this is that example from Clallam County. We were able to invest relatively small dollars and really support their program to do engagement with stakeholders and then develop codes and ordinances and training manuals. And this led to the adoption of a county-wide ordinance, and that is not a requirement under the Clean Water Act. So this is an extensive project that really sets the tone and the bar for stormwater management in Clallam County. So this was really a leveraging project that was able to take these federal dollars, put them in the hands of local entities, and then they were able to actually change the way that they do business on the ground. And next, I will pass it off to.
I think it's me. So I will highlight then some work that was invested in at what we call the sub-regional level. And so giving capacity and investments to efforts that cross regional boundaries. So for Habitat, yep, we have an example of an investment being able to support the Tulalip tribe's leading partners in programmatic recommendations for stream crossings along the railroad, as well as 3 conceptual designs. For stormwater, able to support the Latino Stormwater Pollution Awareness Campaign, which engaged over 2,000 Spanish-speaking community members in Snohomish and Stillaquamish watersheds. And then for shellfish, an example is investing in and being able to support the South Sound Shellfish Recovery collaborative approach to addressing fecal pollution, which I'm going to highlight more in the next slide. So the South Sound Shellfish Recovery Project was coordinated by Pierce County Surface Water Management Program, and it highlights the effectiveness of regional partnerships in action. It brought together, or it brings together, tribal natural resource programs, conservation districts, and local health jurisdictions. And this project has formed a collaborative network to implement shellfish harvest closure protection plans for designated for shellfish protection districts. So funding helps support the capacity to create a shared strategic plan, streamlining efforts to protect and improve marine water quality in South Sound shellfish growing areas, while also reducing the administrative burden to grant management by centralizing the project coordination at one entity, so through Pierce County. Collectively, uh, they have achieved, this is all just under the grant timeline, but achieved technical assistance site visits, 75 agricultural problems corrected, 3,000 water quality samples uh, collected, 92 septic system failures corrected, and provided 17 community workshops. And then work within these partnerships contributed to upgrades in harvestable shellfish acreage in Oakland Bay, Minter Bay, and Burley Lagoon in their region. I think it's Jennifer.
Yes, thank you. All right, and now I'm going to highlight examples at that Puget Sound wide scale. So for the shellfish SIL, Department of Ecology added program capacity for dedicated non-point pollution staff in North and South Puget Sound, really covering that full extent of Puget Sound. Uh, Under a Stormwater Strategic Initiative lead, the Puget Sound Regional Council developed a stormwater parks guidance manual and worked with local communities to provide outreach parks planning, design, and assistance. Sorry, the last bit's cut off here on the screen. And then I'm going to highlight from the strategic initiative, from the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead, the work of Washington Sea Grant. The Washington Sea Grant looked at creating a quantitative approach for calculating sea level rise vulnerability for parcels in the Puget Sound region. So this is really thinking about what is the information that all of us need to plan at multiple scales across Puget Sound, and how to create a tool that really gives us that level of granularity, and also the ability to kind of go in at the different relevant planning scales. This used publicly available data for over 100,000 parcels in Puget Sound, and thought about the both exposure and sensitivity for both infrastructure and habitat. And they're also able to work with colleagues at NOAA and think about a complementary socially modified vulnerability, think about vulnerable communities and attributes of communities within that nexus. And phase 2 of this work is underway with Washington Sea Grant and their partners, where they're building upon this analysis, updating the analysis, expanding the geography slightly to include some additional parts of the strait that couldn't be initially included, and then make this more accessible through interactive, online interactive tools. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Derek.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to talk a bit about the kind of work that we do, the different types of things that we invest in, and kind of how we think about some of that work. So next slide, please. So I've mentioned this before, but we really understand this funding as filling a really unique niche in Puget Sound recovery. This is relatively low strings dollars. It can be allocated and spent on things that a lot of other programs that have really kind of defined objectives, that it's a lot harder to spend money on from those kind of bigger, unwieldy programs. We're really nimble, and these are flexible dollars. So we think about our work in a couple of different ways. So some of our work is really trying to build the foundation for Puget Sound recovery. Sometimes we need information to really understand a problem or understand how to solve it. We also need strong coalitions. We need the social infrastructure to be able to solve these really difficult problems. And then often we have issues in Puget Sound recovery that are really the result of, I won't say failures, but that are really made more difficult by our regulatory and policy frameworks. And there are a lot of issues that we can address through policy. So we also think about institutionalizing support for change. So we do things like building programs from pilots. We work on stewardship and incentives and technical assistance. And we do a lot of work in the social marketing, education, and outreach space. So we do a lot of that kind of middle work based on the foundations that we build. And then also uh, we are trying to seed uh, the ecological restoration work that needs to happen. So we are looking at pilots and demonstration projects. We are trying to fund work that looks like connecting local priorities with strategic goals. So there are multiple different layers that we kind of understand this work to fit into, and all of these are really important for Puget Sound recovery. This isn't necessarily a recovery project our way out of it problem. It's really too big for that and too expensive and too complicated. So we really try and fill a bunch of the niches that other programs really struggle to fill. And then I will also note that we have a nice one-page document that also summarizes some more of this information based on this little framework that we use. Okay, so we fund a lot of different types of work, and here's a way that we've broken down some of the work that we've funded. And these aren't necessarily individual projects, but these are uh, projects that we fund have elements of these in them. So they include things like that range from monitoring all the way to institutional capacity building. I won't read all of these, but I will linger here for a moment and let people peruse these to really understand kind of how we spread our funding around of things that we spend a lot of it on. Yeah, and Julianne mentioned in the chat, and this is kind of important to note, one project might address multiple of these different activity types. So it might be a project that does some sort of implementation and then has a research component or a monitoring component attached to it as well. Or you might be doing program like developing incentives and building institutional capacity at the same time. So one project can address more than one of these. And next slide, please. So again, some of the work that we do, really a lot of it includes research and monitoring. It's a pretty high percentage for the work that we fund. For Puget Sound recovery, this is really our headlights. It helps us understand where we're going and what we might need to do for Puget Sound recovery. So the SILs fund quite a bit of research and monitoring. Some examples of this um, are community-based shoreline restoration effectiveness monitoring, also things like fecal bacteria screening methods, and we were also involved in funding the work that discovered the toxic tire anti-ozonate. So this is a really good example of how we were able to take our Puget Sound geographic funds and invest them in something that was really big and catalytic. So research and monitoring really can kick off quite a chain reaction. So in this example, we were able to fund the team that identified 6-ppd quinone. It was long known that stormwater runoff from roads was killing coho salmon, very acute toxicant, and we didn't know where it was coming from. But we were able to invest funding in trying to isolate the chemical that was responsible for urban runoff mortality syndrome, and that was able to lead to work at the Department of Ecology. It's kicked off work between the state family and the federal family. It's also led to ongoing investments at the um, at our universities as well.
And then next, I'm going to focus on some of the funding niches for investing in stewardship through social marketing, incentives, and technical assistance. These are often key components to many of the priority strategies across the implementation strategies. So as you can see, we had 20% of the projects invested in had an incentive component, and 19% of the projects had an education and awareness component to the work. Some project examples just to highlight here again, but highlighting the habitat invested in the Snohomish Conservation's Snohomish Conservation District-led Regional Forest Stewardship Pilot Program. We also have Stormwater being able to support the development of the shared platform for Puget Sound Conservation Districts, betterground.org. And then the shellfish example is being able to support Snohomish Conservation District's their sound horsekeeping program, which I'm going to highlight next. So sharing some highlights from the sound horsekeeping program around investing in stewardship through social marketing, incentives, and technical assistance. So sound horsekeeping was specifically developed to help horse owners understand how they can reduce fecal pollution sources, a need that had been identified in this area of Snohomish County. This program supported horse owners by providing technical assistance, developing farm plans and technical assistance letters, utilizing social media posts and newsletters, providing on-site assistance for 184 residents during the project duration, as well as 11 education opportunities, and also providing rental equipment to spread manure, which was borrowed 46 times under the project duration. This program provides a certification with a dedicated sound horsekeeping sign seen here. During the project timeframe, 15 farms earned this certification for managing their property in a way that protects both horse health and the environment. This program is a successful model that can be repeated in other areas to assist horse owners to provide or to address potential fecal pollution. And the program, they provided assistance to other counties during their grant, which contributes to the regional capacity to address pollution from horses in the Puget Sound region.
Thanks, Audrey. And I'm going to take the last example and really build it into how we're thinking our investments under the 1.0 funding model have translated into collaborations and further investments under our 2.0 funding model. And so we've already shared the ways that some of our capacity has been involved in regulatory and policy frameworks, and our funding has been as well. So here highlighting the Washington Department of Commerce, where they pull together critical area ordinance adaptive management workshops. And this is a really important opportunity to provide technical assistance to local jurisdictions to think about how to monitor and adaptively manage critical area ordinances. This resulted in 11 workshops that featured 31 experts, and just in the live workshops reached 580 people. These were all virtual and recorded, and it's an available and ongoing resource. And they were able to use that dialogue during these workshops to then take into a phase 2 part of the project where they updated the guidance manual in the portion of the handbook related to critical area adaptive monitoring and adaptive management. And so this has set the stage as we've moved into this period of comprehensive plan updating in Puget Sound to really set the stage for additional work of the strategic initiative leads and all of you in really thinking about how we protect habitat and water quality through land use planning. So building on this, we collaborated across the SILs and with other partners to develop the Sound Choices checklist. And this is really a checklist for local planners to use in their in their comprehensive plan updates, structured by plan element and providing resources and considerations for enhancing habitat protection and water quality protection through each of those elements. Additionally, this resulted in collaboration and ongoing conversations with the Ecosystem Coordination Board and the Land Use Subcommittee, both to think about how to put the Sound Choices checklist into practice and also learn more about where it might be challenging to do so and what were the opportunities. the Stormwater Strategic Initiative and the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead have been able to partner with Department of Commerce as they launched a new grant program with new state funding for salmon recovery through local planning, thinking about how do you really you leverage that local planning process for comprehensive plans and other local planning processes to bringing salmon recovery. And so we were able to make the application through a single RFP under Department of Commerce for eligible local governments and tribes to make it much easier to come in and do only one grant with multiple funding sources for different components of that work, both this building on the sound choices checklist work as well as thinking about how to implement a pilot program for critical area ordinance monitoring and adaptive management. And additionally, DFW has been a great partner bringing the sound choices checklist through the regional regional planners that go and work with local planners in each jurisdiction and bringing the sound choices checklist as a companion resource to the other DFW resources that come into bear. So really thinking about what frameworks we build in our investments and then looking ahead and thinking about what's the next step? Is it further investment? Is it an opportunity for us or other members of the community to collaborate on leveraging the next step that might not be a funding step? And so we're going to continue that theme, thinking a little bit more about how we've been sustaining and accelerating process and progress through the SILs 2.0. And one of the ways we wanted to highlight this is also with the major investments of federal funding and an influx of federal funds that has been coming under the BIL and IRA funding. And so one of the ways we wanted to highlight that is really how HSIL funded work to partners has allowed partners to harness that funding. There have been 3 phases of the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead investments along the stream crossings along the railroad. 2 of those were under 1.0 and a third is ongoing under the 2.0 model. So the first phase was really, where are these stream crossings along the eastern shore of Puget Sound under the railroad? What are the conditions of those culverts? What habitats is upstream? And understanding what might be the priorities if you're thinking about Chinook salmon habitat use. Then building upon that and building really a dialogue with BNSF. And thinking about what does BNSF need to be a partner in this work, what can fit into their business practices while also making good habitat restoration projects, and how to get restoration practitioners all together and speaking to BNSF with a more coordinated voice. And so that was work, being led by the Tulalip tribes, with the partners and their project team, developing programmatic recommendations. So one of the ways BNSF wants to think about things is, can we do the same thing over and over and not have to do a new design every time? So how to think about stream crossings in specific categories, and are there programmatic approaches to that, and doing some initial conceptual design work. And now currently under the 3rd phase of HSIL funding, Tulalip Tribes is using additional funding to do conceptual designs and how they're able to leverage this with aquatic organism passage funds. So those AOP funds that Tulalip Tribes and others have been successful in getting from the federal government can come in and work really effectively on the BNF right-of-way in particular, and HSIL funds for conceptual design can work on out of the right-of-way where there's more complicated projects and other landowners at play. And so our work can be really complementary, setting the stage to bring that federal money to Puget Sound and making better and bigger restoration projects out of it. We've also been thinking a lot about all the different components of our work in terms of building collaborative forums and engaging with the management concept more extensively as we've built from 1.0 into 2.0. So this looks like continuing to engage with the Ecosystem Coordination Board subcommittees, both the Land Use Subcommittee as well as the New Water Quality Subcommittee. This looks like the HSIL Sea Level Rise forum we just hosted. This looks like the pod process that the Stormwater SIL has been leading on, that integrates topically and brings partners together from across the Sound on an integrated topic and integrating the priority conversations and influencing investments. We've been collaborating with LIOs and thinking about integrated planning, and look forward to increasing and continuing to build that trust and relationship going forward. And one example of that is how the Shellfish SIL has been working very closely with LIOs and the partnership on developing the OSS action plans and thinking about how to integrate that action agenda, LIO, and implementation strategy planning and have actionable opportunities and opportunities to advance that work through funding and collaboration. We've been thinking about in 2.0 how to make our investment strategic through requests for proposals, leveraging our funding niche as we shared with you today, and thinking about how can we remove barriers to accessing funding and implementing projects. Both in the process of doing the proposals and in the management side, and thinking in how we can bring also a diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice lens to that work in both the process steps and in the implementation. So as we've shared with you at the beginning, we'd like to take away some big picture takeaways. The SIL model continues to evolve to be responsive to the Puget Sound recovery system needs and to continue to harness and leverage our niche and work collectively to accelerate progress. Our funding can create foundations, programmatic foundations, systematic foundations, and it can catalyze action, larger pots of funding or collective efforts together. And we really seek to uplift all of your efforts. There are so many innovative partners in Puget Sound, and our funding and hopefully bringing you all together is an opportunity to leverage all of our strengths and to advance our collective work in a way that brings all of our voices and efforts forward. So as we close, we'd like to say some thank yous. We'd like to acknowledge our EPA project officers, past and present, as well as the EPA Region 10 and Puget Sound National Recovery Program Office staff. Thank you to our advisory team members, past and present, all of our collaborators and recovery community partners across the partnership, local integrating organizations and member organizations, tribes and tribal consortia, the Puget Sound Management Conference at her writ large, as well as its boards, and so many more. We'd like to thank our SIL staff, past and present, our host and partner agencies, and also a special thank you to Alex Mitchell, the partnership, who supported compiling and analyzing all the subaward data. So with that, we have a couple QR codes here on the screen, but Emily had put the link in the chat already for the funded projects and our contact information. We'll be making this presentation available, and we'd love to take questions and conversation. And we've got about a half an hour or so for that as needed. So to do that, I think we can take questions in the chat, or if folks raise their hands, we'll be able to call on you. See folks coming on video. That indicates you'd like to ask or make a comment or a question. We'd really appreciate it. Dave, please go ahead.
Thanks. I'll take a stab at this. And I appreciate the presentation. I mean, I remember when Strategic Initiative Leads, when that whole process was formed, and it was all about developing NTAs and things that I know tribes had issues with. So I think you guys have come a long way, and I like, where the program, how it's working and where it's going. And I'm not sure whether, I'll just throw this out there. Maybe this isn't the place to bring it up, but I will anyway. I see my friend Dennis McLaren's here. He may have some comments, but the one thing, especially under the habitat strategic initiative leads, is that I don't think anybody disputes that there's a need to protect habitats, critical habitats, that we identify, that have been identified. I think we know where those habitats are that do need to be. I feel like what's lacking is really calling out that it's our current framework of land use regulations and policies that are, they've really led us to where we're at now with, poor habitat conditions and resources suffering from those. And I feel like we could already have the ability to be able to take a look at what those regulations, SMA, GMA, and we can identify where the problems are within those, those regulations that would need to be addressed if we're going to stop the loss of habitat. And I think we can articulate that. And so I think maybe through the Habitat Strategic Initiative lead, I feel like we should be able to put a document together that articulates what needs to be done without getting into that, well, how do you do it piece. You lay it out first so it's identified, and then you convene people to have a conversation about, well, how do you do that? How do you make that happen? And I think that can be done. I don't maybe there's stuff out there that I haven't seen or read that does that, but I feel like as at least the part of the partnership and myself on the leadership council, that we need to be having these discussions and putting them out there. And I don't think we've reached that point yet. So that's just a comment I wanted to make as I sit and watch through this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate your observations and your comment. And I think we'd look forward to further conversations with Leadership Council, with the Federal State Leadership Task Force, and understanding what role we could play. Dennis, I see your hand.
And just before we move on real quick, I will say that, we really focused on the SIL 1.0 work. We did touch on the 2.0, but under 2.0, this issue that you've raised, Dave, is something that we're taking pretty head on. We've been able to fund a series of workshops that have identified some recommendations. We've got some investments in some white papers that link the Clean Water Act and land use management. So I would say that this is something that's ripe, and thank you for continuing to raise it. We don't want it to get left behind.
Thanks, Derek. Dennis, please.
So this is Dennis McLaren, Chair of the Leadership Council, and I just wanted to reinforce Dave's comment. We at the Leadership Council have been doing a series of sessions where we move our Leadership Council's meetings out to local regions and local areas where the LIOs and local governments and tribes give us their input and feedback. And what we have learned is there's a lot of unpermitted and probably illegal shoreline armoring occurring. There's gaps in enforcement of existing critical area and GMA requirements and Shoreline Management Act requirements, and being able to quantify that and being able to identify action steps to fill gaps in existing regulatory programs, and then also to create the capacity and the structure to enforce existing regulations more effectively than they are now, is something we've been hearing a lot about. So I think it's going to be part of our legislative priority discussion, but it's something we would like to see folks at the local level give us feedback on what they need, what sort of funding support. I think if you do provide funding support for more enforcement and for more follow through on the land use side, there has to be accountability around that as well. So that's another issue that we're trying to identify, what might need to be done and how that can be done more effectively. So just wanted to reinforce Dave's comment.
Thank you. And I do think we'll learn too from things like this pilot we have going right now with a recently funded Critical Area Ordinance Adaptive Management Program at Snohomish County. There's been some previous efforts at Kitsap County. And so learning through some pilots to know what capacity is needed at a local level, what kind of, what works and what doesn't, will be really helpful if we want to support scaling up that to many more local jurisdictions. Commissioner St. Clair.
Sorry, 3 screens, I lose my mark sometimes. Thank you, Dave, for your comments. And thank you to the partnership for their efforts on helping with comp planning. This will continue into the future, and I hope next time we can work on timing a little bit because for some of our counties, it came out just a little late for us to really leverage the full capacity of that. But it's such incredibly important and good work for us because the comp plan is what defines a lot of the work that we have to do at the local level. I want to continue to encourage that collaborative work with AWC, the Washington Cities, and WASAC, Washington State Association of Counties, to get local government on board. The land use subcommittee was part of that. The one who has to implement that, and to Dennis's question, we're the one trying to struggle with, oh my gosh, we've had an explosion of unpermitted armoring. How are we going to deal with that in a way that addresses the problem and helps us move forward, incentivizing not to do that, and also how do we fix it? These are local government challenges that we face every day. So I really want to thank you for the work to continue to partnership with local government. We're the shovel in the ground on trying to solve some of these problems, and we appreciate both the technical assistance, but how do we then make it happen? So, the one other point I wanted to say, and Dave's probably heard this, is a problem for me has been the intersectional jurisdictional complexities, like, is DNR in charge of this? Is local government in charge of this? And they play hot potato in getting somebody to solve the problems when we're trying to do stormwater or habitat protection, or those jurisdictional issues continue to be a sticky wicket. And that's an official technical term among all you scientists. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you for sharing your observations and opportunities for improvement in terms of timing. And I just had a note from Julianne on the side as we were thinking about, upcoming timing. Ecology is doing rulemaking around the SMA and then future SMPs updating. And at our sea level forum, last week, it was really an opportunity, and Ecology has been thinking about this, about all of the different aspects of their rulemaking. And I think that was an early conversation, an opportunity for a large number of people to think about habitat resiliency really in that part of that equation. And so I think to your point, early conversations, early opportunities to think about what information do we need to bring to bear early so that all of these different pieces, such as habitat protection, are at the table amongst a whole other host of really challenging decisions. It can be possible. David, please go ahead.
Yes, Jennifer, I just wanted to follow up on Dave's and Dennis's questions and comments. First of all, I'm David Pater. I'm the Commerce Land Use Planning GMA subject matter expert on both the stormwater and habitat SIL teams. So quickly on Dennis's comment. So maybe you noticed, Dennis, but Ecology's Shoreline Environmental Assistance Program, about a year and a half ago, they hired a whole bunch of enforcement outreach specialists to try to focus more on the SMP implementation phase and enforcement. So I believe in Puget Sound, there are 3 of these specialists for each region, Northwest, Southwest region. And then I think they have a floater position too out of Lacey. So they've been trying to work more with local governments on those challenges with enforcement, legal bulkheads. We know that has been going on for decades. So hopefully over time, you'll see some changes there. And I think that's a positive development. As far as GMA, connecting GMA land use planning with habitat and stormwater work, as Derek and Jennifer have mentioned, this is something we've been working on, and I've been kind of the point person in Commerce to work with the SILs on this. And I think we're making progress. Jennifer mentioned the Sound Choices checklist. I think that's an important tool. It's a very short 3 to 4 page document, literally a checklist that local governments can go through and evaluate their comprehensive plans from a habitat and stormwater perspective. So we've been certainly trying to sell that and let local governments know about that. I think Derek mentioned the workshops, focus group workshops we had at the end of 2023. that focused on integrating stormwater management and land use planning better. We reached out to a number of jurisdictions that are doing this work, connected them with jurisdictions that aren't doing this work, which are the bulk of that local governments out there. But there are some jurisdictions like Redmond, Kirkland, Kenmore that have been doing this work thoughtfully, connecting especially stormwater management integration into their comprehensive plans. And I think from a GMA perspective, yeah, you could definitely look at some legislative fixes. But what I've seen in my research and working on this issue for 2 years in this position is there's a lot of good things going on out there, and there's a lot of ways to approach it from a comprehensive plan perspective, for sure. And I think we are making progress, but it's like making a cultural change out there in terms of how local governments do their land use planning and connecting it better to stormwater management and habitat restoration and preservation.
Thank you, David. And I'm just dropping the slides so that more faces can be visible on everyone's screen. I'm just going to read Commissioner St. Clair's comment in the chat, just because for folks who are watching a recording later, they won't have access to seeing that, which is just that as we work on future legislation, work to do with stakeholders and not to do with stakeholders is important. Sorry, do to. I'll say that again. That was too many confusing words together. Work to do with stakeholders and not to do to stakeholders is important. Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments and observations of the kind of the arc of this work over time or opportunities looking ahead? Peter, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, well, I apologize. I'm sick and have no voice, but just appreciate all the great work of the SILs, both in the presentation today and dialogue, but also your work day to day. I also want to just add some thoughts, and Dave, you're always very good at articulating this space and need for policy and program alignment. The other area that I know has improved, and I think it was touched on, but I just want to, is how the SILs have been partnering also with federal agencies on really sticky issues as well that fall within their purview and implementation strategy leadership. And I think very similar stickiness, but really important work that we need to continue to focus on so we can further policy and program alignment around habitat protection, especially, Dave. So I know there are some examples out there in the SIL space. I can't recall them off the top of my head, but also I just want to acknowledge their role in the management conference itself, in some of the work groups of the boards. Accelerating Progress Committee is one of those right now. I'm in the Salmon Recovery Council, the state federal charter groups around stormwater and transportation. I know Derek and his team are really helping there too, that are all in that space. And I think we always need to be thinking about that and how we can adapt and continue to grow the strength of that role, both in SIL 2.0 and going forward. So thank you. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Dennis, for your comment in the chat. I'm going to read it because it's very kind. It is great to hear the progress being made through the work of the SILs, and this work is much appreciated.
Can I also, I didn't see any hands. I just want to add one other thing. For those of you really active in the management conference, you'll notice in some of the upcoming agendas that we, meaning EPA, will be talking about input on our approach, process approach, and thinking guide, our principles around the next funding model. So it's really great timing wise for this presentation for all the boards around what's going on now in this whole space. And I think that'll be helpful for all of us as we engage in a dialogue around the next funding model and EPA's funding of implementation of the action agenda. So I just wanted to provide a nudge in that context for upcoming conversations I know we'll all be having together over the next few months.
Thanks again, Peter. I'm not seeing further questions or comments in the chat or hands. Maybe wait one more minute, but we realize everyone is busy, and we really appreciate you all taking over an hour out of your time to let us share this with you. We couldn't highlight all of the work that has been done. So many partners have done work, as you saw, under the 230 projects, and really encourage you all to check out the funding page, as Emily highlighted, and talk to your collaborators about what SIL funding has meant to them and opportunities. And we really look forward to continuing to talk with you all. We're always available. You can always reach out to any one of us to get in contact with the rest, and we appreciate the opportunity to continue this dialogue. Angela, yes, we will be sharing the slides and the recording. We'll make them available on our website, and we'll be putting the recording via the WDFW YouTube to make it more accessible with closed captioning, and that link will also be available. So we hope to be able to do that in the next week or so. All right. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot.
Great work. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you